Hello and welcome to Running the Table, the podcast where we run through everything on the table in the world of sports. And March is here. Let the madness begin. In our last video, we covered some mid-major conferences that got some attention throughout the year. West Coast, Missouri Valley, Mountain West, and some other mid-major sleeper teams. But now we're going to get into the Power Six conferences. And the first of which that we're going to cover is my very own Big East. So, Tim, without further delay, you ready to go?
Let's run it.
And run it we shall. So, the Big East has been a highly competitive conference this year with a lot of teams getting jumbled around in the middle. The top is pretty top heavy. You have your Providence, your Villanova, your UConn. And then in the middle, all of them are just kind of jostling for position. So, the Big East is looking at 6, 7, maybe 8 teams, which was not the case last year. So let's get into some of these teams that we'll potentially see down the line. And the first of which is the Big East regular season champions, the Providence Friars. Right now they're sitting at 24-3. They're 14-2. And this is an incredibly skilled team that's able to come through in late games and turn it on down the stretch. They're positioned right now as like a 2 seed. A lot of people think that, which is, Providence's record and the way they've been winning games is kind of fluky because they have sort of an outlandish record in close games. They always find a way to win, but I don't know.
It's hard to argue against a team that struggles to lose.
Exactly. They find a way to win games no matter the case and no matter against what team.
Sometimes that's better than just having overall skill. Just finding ways to win, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense. You win the game.
The old adage is better to be lucky than good, but a win is a win is a win. And they're led by Nate Watson and Jared Bynum. You got Noah Horkler on the boards. And this is a team that can make some noise in the Big East tournament and in March.
Yeah, I mean, they're a team that's pretty. I would say they're pretty balanced considering the fact that they've got both inside game and shooters outside. But they're a pretty solid team throughout this year, obviously having some of these close games, other than their most recent win over Creighton, where they won by 21. Their last 3 wins were all in overtime or later, which, like you said, is a testament to their ability to win close games. But one of the things I think that's been most interesting for them is the role of transfers, because they haven't always been like a big team in recruiting and whatnot, but they were able to get transfer Al Durham actually from Indiana University this past year. And he's found a nice home at Providence, averaging 13.3 points per game, 3 rebounds per game, and 3.4 assists per game. So he's not the most efficient shooter for them, but he brings a lot more veteran experience to the team. He's a very solid free throw shooter for them to go to late game, which of course is obviously big. We've talked about in winning some of these close games. So there's a lot of things to like about them. And of course, their record and whatnot, they've been able to win a lot of their tough games. So props to them for that. They're looking very solid going into this tournament.
They captured the regular season title, and now they're going to look to win the Big East tournament, but not if the Villanova Wildcats have anything to say about it. This is your typical class of the Big East. This is a Jay Wright-led team. They're solid as ever. I mean, their resume isn't nearly as strong as the other teams around them. They're a 3 seed. Like some of the other 3 seeds, their resumes are a little bit stronger, but Villanova is a fundamentally sound team. They always are, and they very well could come out and just shock everybody and win the Big East outright. I mean, it wouldn't be much of a shock per se, but shock is in like electrify, like power. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't be a surprise to anybody if Villanova won the Big East.
No, and one of the things I think that is such a good thing for this Villanova team that Jay Wright talked about at the beginning of the season was very purposeful, is this team is battle tested. They purposely scheduled themselves a very difficult non-conference schedule, and they've ended up losing 7 games because of it, obviously 4 of them being from in-conference. But it doesn't define their talent nor their success as a team, because they still find themselves ranked 11th in the country, despite having those 7 losses going into this week. And one of their main reasons of that is obviously guard Colin Gillespie, who is their leading scorer and like just the heart and soul of this team. He was coming back off of a torn MCL that kept him out of the NCAA tournament last year, which was a big pain for this Villanova team because Jay Wright just knows that he said that he's just completely irreplaceable for this team. And he's fought through a couple of nagging injuries this year, including a severe right ankle sprain earlier on in February. But he comes to play in big games. He's a big time shot maker. And if they need a big shot at any point in the game, that you know who they're going to. They've got a lot of good guys on this team, but he's really their go-to guy down the stretch.
Yeah, we can't say enough about Colin Gillespie. When he went down last year, Villanova really took a big hit in terms of their ability to go deep in the NCAA
Even
tournament.
Just morally as well, because that's just hard to lose your big leader right when you feel like you need them most going into the tournament.
Yeah, and they were shocked last year in the Big East tournament. If you remember, they lost to Georgetown,
who ended up going on to take the whole thing.
Yeah, but Colin Gillespie is absolutely irreplaceable, and he's spearheading a Villanova team that is also looking to make some noise. After that, we got the UConn Huskies, and this is a talented team with RJ Cole, Adama Sanogo, and Isaiah Whaley. Dan Hurley's got this team composed and poised for running the tournament. I mean, they're playing high quality basketball at the right time. They've won their last 5 in a row, which momentum is always huge. And they've won their last 6 of 8. And those 2 losses being at Xavier and at Villanova. So UConn is definitely picking it up at just the right time. And they're firing on all cylinders as well.
Yeah, this team they're a very well-rounded team. And like you said, playing their best basketball at the right time. You talked about they lost at Villanova, but they also just recently had a 2-point win over Villanova a little over a week ago. So they're playing really well. I think they're a pretty solid balance of offense and defense because they have 3 guys that are averaging over 13 points a game, but they also have almost 4 guys who average around 1 steal a game and 2 guys that average 2 blocks per game. So it's like you have a lot of different aspects of this team, a lot of guys that can do a lot of things. And when it comes down to it, that is going to be real big because you're not always going to get 100% performance out of everyone in every given day. So you want to have guys that you can go to around the horn that can make plays for you when you need it most.
Well, as far as just having big guys down low, the duo of Adama Sanogo and Isaiah Whaley, that's not exactly something you can find everywhere in the Big East. No. And I think if they funnel through those 2 guys and RJ Cole running the point, I think they're going to be just fine in the Big East tournament. And they're looking like a 4 seed right now, and it is a well-deserving spot. So after that, we're going to go to Omaha, Nebraska for the Creighton Bluejays. They're also a team that is red hot. I mean, they won 6 in a row right before a 20-point loss to Providence, but still we just talked about how good a team Providence was. That's not really a loss that's too terrible. This is a solid team led by the trio of Ryans, Ryan Nembhard, Ryan Hawkins, and Ryan Kalkbrenner. And those 3 guys lead the way for a Creighton team that they've struggled at times throughout the season, but they're getting it back on the right track.
Yeah, no, you talked about that trio of Ryans, which I thought was a really amusing thing for them, but they do a lot of damage for this Creighton team with their 2 main forwards, Ryan Hawkins and Ryan Kalkbrenner, like you said, being their top 2 scorers and rebounders, while Ryan Nembhard, who is actually the younger brother of Gonzaga guard Andrew Nembhard, he's their main playmaker, leading their team in assists per game, and while averaging 11 plus points of his own. And the one thing that I think is very unique about this team and their style of play is the play of Ryan Kalkbrenner, because he is a 7'1" sophomore that's averaging just short of 3 blocks per game, which of course is just a monster number. You can't find much of that in the Big East, and not a whole lot of that in all of college basketball, but he moves really, really well for 7'1". And I think that's one of their biggest assets is being able to use him so well in the pick and roll game and his ability to move off the ball, which of course helps his shot block ability and timing as well. But those trio of guys really does a lot of damage for this team, and that's going to help them a lot going down the stretch.
Well, I mean, more on Kalkbrenner. You talked about how good he is on the defensive end with the blocks per game. He's on the offensive side. He's leading the conference in field goal percentage, shooting 63% from the field. So he's pretty efficient when he shoots the ball on offense. So that's another asset that Creighton can use to just run the offense through the big men.
Yeah, they're a really solid team, and they've definitely had some struggles this year. With losing some games here and there just based on of overall performance having an off night. But I don't think their record really shows their ceiling as a team, because I think they really have the ability to play with some of the best if they have all their pieces simultaneously working together.
Yeah. Now we'll travel over to the reincarnation of the Marquette Golden Eagles. And what a job Shaka Smart has done. Fresh faces, new talent across the board, and this program has been brought back to life. They're looking at a 7 seed right now. They got Justin Lewis playing out of his mind, but they have the influx of transfers. Daryl Morcell, Tyler Kolek, and Olivier Maxence Prosper, all from Division I schools that have come over to Marquette, and they bought into Shaka Smart's program. So this is a team that has really transformed themselves over the last year or so.
Oh yeah, no, they're a bit of an interesting team, because like obviously their improvement has been pretty dramatic from one season ago, but they're definitely interesting. The fact that they've had some great wins as well as some confusing losses. So it's a little bit hard to gauge some of like that true ceiling for them when they're playing their best basketball consistently, but they definitely have a pretty high ceiling. One of the things I noticed is I feel like they're a team that does just about everything pretty well, but not like one specific thing spectacularly. And I think that's kind of what sometimes has fallen short for them sometimes, and allowed them to lose 10 or so games. But yeah, you talked about the transfer. Specifically, I wanted to take a look at Daryl Morcell. He was a transfer from Maryland. He's a 5th-year grad transfer, and he's provided a lot of like veteran experience for this team. Obviously, with a new coach and you bring in a lot of guys, it's nice to have one of those guys that's kind of, even if he's not leading you in every stat, he's kind of like that rock that holds you down with some of that experience. And coming from a program like Maryland, he's definitely got some pretty good experience under his belt.
Daryl Morcell, big glue guy. And when it comes to just bringing back a program super duper quickly, go to the transfer portal, see who's available and grab them. We talked about how Providence did it. And Marquette is another example of a team that just searches through the transfer portal to grab high-end talent. Now, after that, we got the Seton Hall Pirates. And when I look at Seton Hall, this is probably the most average team in the Big East. You know, they're a team that they've lost to the teams that are more skilled than them, and they've handled the teams that they're better than. You know, they're led by Jared Rhoden. They've got some upside, but they're not exactly like Providence, Villanova, UConn, like that upper echelon of teams in the Big East. So like Seton Hall isn't bad by any means. They just don't have that upside like some other, you know, Big East teams. They're looking at an 8 seed right now in the tournament, and they should get in, you know, but I don't know.
Yeah, they're a pretty interesting team in the fact that they go very deep in their bench, with only one player averaging more than 30 minutes per game, and around 9 players that average around 20 minutes per game or above. So they're definitely a team that I would say probably handles foul trouble pretty well, because they're not afraid to go to a lot of different guys. And it leads them to be a pretty balanced offensive team. But defense is equally as important to them. They've got 4 guys who average more than 1 steal a game. But
they got the Big East leading blocker in Ike Obiagu. You know, like
it's an adventure to pronounce that one.
Well, he's got over 3 blocks a game, and he's leading the conference, which is impressive in its own right.
Yeah, so the defense is equally as important to them. And I think kind of the story of their season has just been kind of like, it was a sharp incline, and then they hit a couple bumps in the road, and it's been a relatively sharp decline since. That it got off to a really hot start, going 9-1 in their first 10 games, with wins over previously number 4 Michigan, and at the time number 7 Texas. Obviously, those teams have massively fluctuated in rankings. But after having a 3-game stretch in December canceled because of COVID, they began to hit some bumps in the road, losing 2 straight games on 4 separate occasions, until mid to late February, where they've been able to stretch 3 wins in a row. So it's a little difficult for them to find that consistency again that they had to start the season. Now, granted, some of it has been is that conference play is difficult. So once they entered conference, it's hard to like you said, with them not being in quite that upper echelon of the Big East, it's natural for them to drop a couple of games here and there. But they just got to keep building on those last couple of wins that they've got going into this Big East tournament to try to make some noise and either secure themselves in by winning the tournament, or just proving that they belong there by getting a couple of wins and establishing themselves around the mid to low single digits in seeding.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned how inconsistent Seton Hall can be at times. when I look at this next team, St. John's, now that's a team that is consistently inconsistent. They've got a lot of talent up top with Julian Champagny and Posh Alexander, but inconsistent stretches, they've absolutely sunk their chances. Like for the second half of the season, win 2, lose 2, win 2, lose 2, wash, rinse, repeat for the entire second half. And what is otherwise look like a tournament team is sitting at 15-13 and a 7-10 conference record. And that's just not going to cut the mustard.
No, they've got a lot still to prove with everything that they've dealt with in like the second half of the season. They're another team once again that got off to a really hot start, but then had some bumps in the road with COVID, and then it's just been kind of a notch fall ever since then. Like you said, with the on and off 2 wins, 2 losses. They've put up some fights with some of the better teams. They just haven't been quite able to finish them, and that's what's been kind of having people on the fence with them a lot of what type of team they really are, because they've got some good talent. They've got a lot of role player guys, but they just haven't been able to quite finish games, and that's been their biggest struggle.
Yeah, it's like I like St. John's. I like the talent that they have. You know, you also get Aaron Wheeler, your former Purdue guy, who's found a home. But it's almost like they don't really even know what they are. It's like they haven't really chosen what they want to be. And if you don't have an identity at this point, it's going to do you a lot more harm than good.
It's a lot to be consistent without that identity, without that sort of instinctual game plan of what you want to do to teams in and out, like every single time you step on the court. But like you said, with Aaron Wheeler, it's been really nice to see him find a home with this St. John's team. He's improved on his 3-point shooting, which was one of his big knocks at Purdue that he struggled with the past 2 seasons. But he's been a great addition in the transfer portal as well. You can see a lot of these Big East teams really embrace trying to find these guys from transfer portal.
Mm-hmm. You know, another team that we got in the Big East that it's tied with St. John's in conference, but they're actually in the tournament right now. Xavier, they're 17-11. They're 7-10 in conference play. And they've just been able to close out games better than St. John's has. See, like this is when I look at Xavier, I see a scrappy, gritty team that can sneak up on you fast if you're not paying attention. See the triple overtime game against Providence. That seemed like a game that it was never going to end, and Xavier just would not go away. And that's who they are as a basketball team. Point guard Paul Scruggs embodies this team perfectly. Small, gritty, scrappy. He's going to fight, claw, kick, do whatever you can to stick around and just be the biggest thorn in your side that they can be.
Yeah, I think with Xavier, is like obviously despite losing 10 games in conference play, they're still a very solid team. And they're one that has struggled a lot lately, dropping 7 of their last 8 games. But their big thing has been close games, like that triple overtime game and a couple other ones in these last 7 or 8. They're just not being able to get quite over that hump, and I think that's why they're still being considered a pretty solid team and tournament worthy, because they don't often get blown out, and they've obviously won quite a few games. And it's just whether or not they're going to be able to turn it around at the right time. Because right now they're struggling on a current 4-game losing streak. So it's, will they be able to turn it around and get themselves back on the right track heading into this Big East tournament, and then see what noise they could potentially make in the national tournament as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, those are the 8 most competitive teams in the Big East. Now, before we predict who's going to win the Big East, hold on a second.
We got one more to sprinkle in there.
One more. Aha, found it.
You can't
know what's coming up.
You can't go through.
You know what's coming up
without mentioning the Bulldogs.
You really think that we were going to do a Big East video and I'm not going to mention Butler? Come on now.
Can't speed past the Bulldogs.
Exactly. Even though a lot of teams in the Big East has this year, because we stink and
not great.
We're not very good. And mainly because you talked about like Xavier, St. John's not being able to close out games.
That's been the epitome of the Bulldogs this season.
That has been our mantra this season. If we have a lead, watch us lose it. And I mean, hey, anything can happen in the Big East. You never know. But as far as Butler goes, they're 13-17. They're 6-13 in the Big East. They have had a very, very abysmal year, especially for their standards. And it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. So
yeah, they're just they're a lackluster offense with a mediocre defense, and combining those two usually doesn't equal a lot of one games. And I think the biggest thing for them is they also don't help themselves at the free throw line, only shooting 69% from the charity stripe. So it's like there's just not a whole lot of things that go right for this team, except for the fact when they get a lead, and then they just kind of sprinkle it away.
yeah, we don't go out with a bang. We go out with a whimper. And you mentioned our struggles from the free throw line here at Butler. Whenever somebody knocks down 2 of 2 free throws, we celebrate.
It's a party.
It's a party. So it's a long road back for Butler to be nationally prominent like they used to. They haven't been the same since COVID hit. I mean, in 2020, they were projected to be a 5 seed in the tournament. They had a really, really good team, and then everything shut down and they just haven't been the same since. But enough of my team.
Yeah. Get them out of here.
Yeah. It's time to predict who's going to win the Big East. Tim, who you got?
Like you said, in this upper echelon, you've got a lot of good teams with a lot of good talent. You'll take a look at Providence, and obviously their record has been very good. They've been able to eke out a lot of close games. But I think I might have mentioned something similar last year, and I can't remember exactly the way I worded it, but I really like the way that Jay Wright prepares his teams for like late tournament success, whether that be at the NCAA tournament level or Big East level. And I think with everything they've gone through this year, their record doesn't speak to their overall talent. And I think that they're going to be able to grind out some of these games in this Big East tournament, including potentially and honestly probably a game against Providence. And I think that Villanova is actually going to come away with this one.
Yeah, funny that you mention Providence, because as far as who I think is going to win the Big East, it won't be the most popular pick in the world. But Ed Cooley's coaching down the stretch has kept his team composed, and I don't think their record is nearly as much of a fluke as people say it is. I mean, they have wins at Wisconsin, against Texas Tech, and they swept Xavier, Watson, Durham, Bynum. They can lead and keep them afloat, and they can survive the Big East gauntlet. So essentially, I'm taking a flyer on the Friars.
Hey, I mean, they're a very solid team. You can't argue against some of their wins. And like you said, they're a very solid team, and I think I am also a believer in this Providence team. One of the things that it kind of gets glossed over because it's not paid attention to, but actually in the preseason, Providence also upset Purdue. They played each other in the preseason, and Providence did get the best of them there. So I really do believe that they do have the talent to play at the higher level, but I don't know. I really like this Villanova team, and I think their veteran presence is just going to be a little too much to handle.
Yeah, well, that's why you play the tournament, and Madison Square Garden, one of the most storied venues. Who will win remains to be seen. But that is all we got for the Big East breakdown. We'll be coming at you with the other 5 conferences of the Power 6. And
got a lot coming.
Oh, we have a lot coming. This is March. We sleep in May, and all those other fun John Rothstein quotes. But yeah, we got tons more on the way. But until then, like and subscribe for more Running the Table content, and we out.